Momentum is building to end the time shift that most Americans deal with twice a year. On Monday, Nebraska state lawmakers advanced a bill that would make daylight saving time permanent. The U.S. Senate followed suit the next day when it passed the Sunshine Protection Act. The legislation would keep Americans on the hour-ahead schedule year-round. If the House approves the legislation and the president signs it, the law would take effect in November of 2023. Advocates say permanent daylight saving time would prevent injuries and save lives, but many medical professionals say it's not that simple. For more on this, I want to bring in Dr. Yuen. She is a board-certified physician and a fellow of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. Dr. Yuen, thank you for being here. So as I see it, there are three different positions people could take: continue moving back and forth, going permanent daylight savings time, or going permanent standard time. Do you have a particular position, one of those that you think is the best, and what are the health impacts of all three?
Right. We support permanent standard time. One of the reasons is that we have seen the clocks switching back and forth, particularly swing time, when we lose an hour's sleep. The number of accidents have gone up. The number of medical errors, as reported by Mayo Clinic, has gone up. And we just don't feel good, right? So typically we would try to avert sleep loss and try to maintain one set time. Having said that, we think that standard time is probably the way to go because it's more consistent with our innate biological clock, which would tell us what time to get up, what time to eat, what time to perform various functions, and to be able to maintain peak alertness.
But that's not what Congress is considering right now. What they're considering is actually making daylight saving time permanent. By the way, it's daylight saving time and not daylight savings time, something that all of us news anchors have recently learned, as well as many people in the country. But why are they looking at making daylight saving time permanent as opposed to standard time?
Well, I think the reason behind it is that none of us would typically like switching back and forth. Most Americans would prefer to have one time or the other. The switching back and forth is causing a lot of biological rhythm disruptions, as you can expect. Mm-hmm. Now, we would, as scientists and also sleep medicine practitioners, would like to be able to have some input. The House committee has had input from the scientific community, but not the Senate. Secondly, we think that we've seen this before.
Right.
And we have
in the 1970s, right?
Precisely. And it was so unpopular that 1974, it was quickly repealed. And so I think that we should take our experiences into account and really look at the science that supports standard time as a permanent time. We think that in the wintertime, summer, sure, we have more sunlight. But in the winter months, one of the reasons in the 70s it was unpopular is because we all have to go to work or go to school in the dark. And that would increase the number of fatalities for school-age children that are no longer able to bicycle, or potentially, the parents would have to drop off, or the bus drivers would have to gather the children at an early time period. We just think that that's rather unsafe. And second of all, with gas prices being what they are, we all have to go to our work in the dark. And therefore, we think that it's shifting some of the energy costs into the population consumers.
So, Dr. Yuen, if it was unpopular in the 1970s when the U.S. previously tried to make daylight saving time permanent, and you prefer standard time. It's interesting, too, that you say the Senate, which is the chamber in which it actually passed, is the one that didn't have the analysis and the scientific input that you're providing the House. Is it better from a medical perspective to continue switching back and forth, or to make daylight saving time, which you say is also associated with a share of health risks, and in particular for children, to make that permanent? Which, if we're not choosing between standard time, which is what you prefer, but we're choosing between what the Senate has currently passed, which is permanent daylight saving time, or continuing to switch back and forth, from a medical and health perspective, which one is better?
Well, I think that the least desirable, right, would be switching back and forth, just because constantly making the adjustments are making our lives fairly challenging, to say the least, but there is the best option, right? The best option is to keep standard time permanent, so we avoid the switching back and forth, and we are not losing sleep. Because one of the other aspects that we have to look into are the effects of missing an hour's sleep. So a lot of us think that we can overcome the challenges, but the science behind it state that over the 8 months when we had daylight saving time, there is actually more sleep loss, and we cannot actually be able to counteract some of the ill effects. And that includes metabolic syndrome, right? So studies have recently shown that even losing 1 or 2 hours sleep a week can increase our blood sugar levels. And so are we putting everyone at risk by having permanent daylight saving time in increasing risk of diabetes, hyperglycemia, and the inability to lose weight, and worsening the mental distress for our teens and middle schoolers? One of the reasons that the sleep community have been behind start school later is so that teens whose biological clocks are naturally longer than 24 hours, that even if they wanted to go to sleep early, they cannot. And so by having later school start time would allow them to get the rest that they need. Now, having permanent daylight saving time would negate any change, any benefit that we'll have for our middle schoolers and teenagers. So with these biological needs that are not being met, then are we necessarily putting them at risk of having decreases in concentration, decreases in memory, inability to learn? So I think from our standpoint, it would not make sense to be able to start school later and then pushing their time to show up at school earlier. And what we also need to know is school in the United States currently is starting at sometimes 7 with the first bell, but at the latest about 8 o'clock for majority of the schools. And so if you push daylight saving time into year round, that means a lot of the northern states, the students will have to be in school before there is actually sunlight. Most of the states will not see any daylight until 8 o'clock in the morning. That's sunrise. And so we don't perform well in the dark.
Well, as a natural night owl, I certainly struggle with it. Dr. Yuen, thank you so much.
Thank you.